one of the things that I've come back to again and again is the concept of psychologization, which was off the that book that we both read, The American Mind. What's it called? The Coddling of the American Mind, Jonathan Leight. I know it's not his idea, but the idea that psychologization has gotten into everything, and everybody is now thinking, well, everybody uses way too many psychological terms, which they shouldn't be using. And they're thinking in a psychological paradigm. And what I was saying is like, great for like psychotherapy. You know, I'm in psychotherapy. I know that you do it as well. You want to be in a space where you're not morally judged and you're not condemned. Perfect. But if if it gets out into the culture and there's no moral judgment of anything and nobody's ever condemned, I mean, number one, you're absolutely opening the door for narcissistic abuse. And everything kind of sucks more if there's no moral judgment. I don't know how to put that in words though that doesn't sound like I'm saying everybody should be more morally judgmental of each other.
So maybe elaborate on the idea that I think maybe two things have happened. So at the first wave, it was a lack of moral judgment, and now it seems like an overcompensation of moral judgment. Do you think that's the case, and why do you think that is?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. So if you look at like cultural trends, we had postmodernism, which was, you know, usually, not all, but usually postmodernism and moral relativism go hand in hand. It's unusual to find a postmodernist thinker or a postmodernist style of anything that isn't trying to suggest the idea that everything is nothing and nothing is everything. That it's all just social constructs. Yes, you may see that as evil in your country, but in another country and another culture, that's not evil, that's good. Which I just really think is a cop-out. And I suspect most people, even unconsciously, know that's a bit of a cop-out. So then they find the same people, like I'm really trying not to say the word woke, but woke-ishness. And it's because you've got woke, and then it's like a comet, isn't it? You've got woke, diehard woke, and then you've got this sort of miasma around it of people who kind of half believe, don't, they signal that they do. But it's, thou shalt not be morally judgmental, thou shalt not condemn. So they suppress that urge and they go, we're the moral relativists, we don't judge anything. And then on the backside of it, they're the most judgmental, condemning people you can imagine who want to deplatform everybody from a position of, we judge no one, because it's all a social construct. God damn, I wish I hadn't forgotten that. How do you cancel Joe Rogan if you're the same people who say it's all just a social construct? I wish I'd thought of that the time that the story broke. It's easy to get lost with it. But yeah, I think that's how it's gone.
Do you remember that time? Because I remember that time where everything was almost like complete moral degeneracy and everything just was like, could be anything. They had garbage MTV, like trash reality TV. There was like an incomplete doubling down of the degeneracy with no judgment. Yeah. And was there a time that you kind of saw a turn here? And why and how do you think the psychology terms, this over-psychologization began?
Well, that's a really, really good question. Okay, I'm going to try and answer it because it will test my ability to bullshit on the fly. So this is Richard's bullshit answer based only on Richard's subjective experience. I think I was born 78, come up in the 80s, and then in 1991 I was I'd lived in Portugal my whole life. It wasn't morally degenerate, but it was extremely liberal. Like the boundaries between age groups, ethnicities, nationalities, language groups, classes, we were all in one place. And it was actually pretty healthy. It was the healthiest permutation of that I've ever seen. It was very sporty. The environment I was in Villamoura in the 80s, which is in the Algarve, it was like, if you play tennis well, or you run well, or you swim well, and you like drinking alcohol and you like eating food, which pretty much describes like a pretty wide chunk of humanity, that was the important thing. And your tennis serve would be way more important than if you're from if you're from the Netherlands, or if you're Angolan, or you're black, or you're white, or that wasn't the key. That wasn't how they spoke about it. It wasn't a utopia. Obviously, there was racism there, but not this racial obsession that we have. It was like, can you play tennis? Can you run? Can you swim? Do you drink? Do you dance? It was much more. There was a lot of nouveau riche there. There was a lot of people. There was a lot of money, and it was the 1980s timeshare boom. A lot of millionaires were being created. It was a good atmosphere. The economy was coming up, and people were up. Then I was sent to boarding school in '91, and it was like this rigid religious environment, which was a real downer for me. So I'd gone from like topless girls in bikinis by the pool at age 12 to everybody in a fucking Harry Potter school uniform at age 13. It wasn't fun. It was a downer. It was a real fucking downer for me. And I remember even then seeing like a pitch shift, 91, 92, 93. People were complaining about political correctness. Even back then. Jordan Peterson has this whole thing, but there's interviews I can show you from 92, 93 with a guy, I can't remember his first name, but his surname is Rose, and the same talking points about political correctness that Jordan Peterson has about the postmodernists, the leftists, the radicals, so on and so forth. But you could see this movement. Robert Anton Wilson in 95 wrote a book called The New Inquisition that was railing against the movement towards political correctness. 96, I go to university. I'm pretty much an SJW. I was like, I did psychology, but I had the purple hair, pierced face. I was politically active-ish, all for gay rights, all for, whatever, pretty right, like a lot of kids are. 97, 98, 99, in my personal experience and in the culture, I saw this weird shift. So in my personal experience, when I was in that university, when I was being for gay rights, for the rights of ethnic minorities and everything else, that was fine. But I set up a Muay Thai society, the first Muay Thai society at Aston University. If you enjoy that Muay Thai society at Aston, it took me a fucking year to get that done. And I had to go through Stalinist-style trials to get it done. I think I told you this story. Like, they were accusing me of bringing toxic masculinity to the campus. And literally trials where I sat in a room with a panel of 12, an all-female panel that had my ex-girlfriend on it. Of course it did. She'd turned gay. Her gay friends were on it. And I'm looking at people with pierced septums, blue hair, blah, 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 this, that, these are not the hot, popular girls at university. And I'm there being a toxically masculine white male trying to bring Muay Thai to the university. And they went after me. Like, personally, I had to do that 3 times. And I was so dumb. I just kept asking. I was like, I've read the rules of setting up a society in the guild. These are the 5 steps. I've done them all. Let us train here. I have the instructor who's a really good instructor. Why the fuck won't you let me train here? We'd have these mad conversations where they'd be like, Muay Thai is violence and we don't want violence here. I'm like, this is Birmingham in the 90s. Birmingham is a rough city. It's not known for being particularly rough, but there were fights everywhere and students were getting battered. And I was like, not only is our guy a Muay Thai instructor, he's a world-class self-defense instructor. The students need this. It's good for the campus. It's good for the guild. You're talking about toxic masculinity. You let the rugby team trash the fucking guild bar every week and you have a budget for it. They even have a budget, knowing that these drunk rugby players are going to break tables, but I'm the toxically masculine one. So this is fucking insane. And that was, I won eventually. It's a boring story, but eventually I got my Muay Thai society. It was hugely popular, did really, really well. And I believe it's still going to this day. But whilst that was going on, 97, 98, 99, I saw in mainstream culture something weird was happening where we were moving from bullying ethnic minorities is bad. We'd all seen Mississippi burning. We'd all watched Schindler's List. The genocide in Bosnia had just happened. And we were all on the same page. Like, this is wrong. You shouldn't target an ethnic minority and fucking kill them. Okay, it's pretty easy. You shouldn't beat up women for being women. You shouldn't beat up gays for being gays. You should let people live their lives. And it was, let people live their lives. And then that shifted to attack people in positions of power. And I was like, well, wait a fucking second now. How are you defining that? by their skin color. And I was like, but we just said don't do that. And in my, beyond the Muay Thai thing, this was my final year after I wrote my final dissertation. And I was in a class, it was a module on feminism. And this totally insane psychopath, I now realize, it was a big, big dude, not a violent guy, but hugely built, gay, white dude, took over. I think it was a small lecture. There was about 15 of us in it. And he went through everybody in the room and he was like, I'm damned because I'm gay. You're damned because you're black. You're damned, literally, and nobody stopped him. The teacher didn't stop him. And then he came to me and he was like, but you are the worst piece of shit in here because you are a straight white man. And I'm just like, what? Brothers and sisters, I thought we were on the same side. So I could see this move from Douglas Murray says this. It was like we had a battle, we won it. Like we killed the enemies. Like you couldn't, anybody who stood up and said, beat up gay people, fuck the puffs, annihilated. Anybody who was like, I don't like Pakistanis, blah, 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 beat them up, annihilated, silenced. It was done. And then instead of going, well done, chaps and chapettes, that was good. We then turned on ourselves. Which was, it was a long-winded way of answering that question. I think it was around that time, but that could just be my bullshit subjective experience. But if you look culturally, there are other markers of that. The last point I would make, just to try and reinforce this, there's a series that came out called Queer as Folk. Charlie Hunman, who played Jax in the motorcycle thing, and the dude who played Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. He's an older man with an underage boyfriend, and it was graphic. There were graphic gay sex scenes in this. There was a scene of, I think Charlie Hunman gets cum on his face. And this was Channel 4. It's like 9 o'clock it's the UK. It's 1997. And this underage boy has cum on his face from his this older daddy gay lover. And I was watching this and I was like, because I was all for it. Okay, so there's a TV show about gay people. It's for gay people, by gay people. Right on, let's go. And then I watched it and I was like, hang on a minute. I'm straight. There's no shows like this where you would, an underage girl would be come on by her, like she's 17 or whatever Charlie Hunnam was, and the boyfriend is 28 and he comes on her face and you show the cum. You don't see like genitals, but you saw the cum hit his face. So there's no way that would happen. And I was still only young, but I could just feel this break. Like we were moving in a weird direction where that which we had said was disempowered and was below everything else was clearly empowered. And in some ways was not only disempowered, it was more powerful than everything else. So yeah, I would say late 90s, I think was the shift. And then it progressed from there. After that, there were more and more students. So you have more and more people sort of who are open to this, people like me. And then it just became where we are today. I think it just grew from there.
I think I got an interesting question here. So that marks around when you saw it subjectively. What do you think, if there is a correlation between the overuse of psychology plus this cultural shift in general? Why isn't it more so people just pointing fingers, saying just because? Instead, they're weaponizing a lot of these terminologies, utilizing that as part of identity. Where does this tie in? How come it's so enwrapped in psychologization, if that's the word?
Yeah, psychologization. Trying so hard not to sound like Jordan Peterson. Yeah, I got to do it. I have to say universities. I think Jonathan Haidt made the same point. Universities, so number one, even before I joined university, there were articles being written in the mid-90s saying universities are going in the wrong direction. They used to be places of learning, and now they're becoming businesses. They realized they could make money from students and through student loans. And then the government was like, hey, great, we can get all of our smart young people into huge amounts of debt before the age of 21, where they owe us, the government, money that they'll be paying off for the rest of their lives. Perfect. That's a good citizen. When I left university, I owed 15,000. Students now leave university, they owe 45, 60,000 pounds. To who? Student loans company. Who's that? British government. So universities really, really blew up. What do you have at university? You have young people who've come from their parents' homes, age 18. That's what I did. I came from my mama house. My mum was doing my laundry. She was making my meals. And I went from that house. And then I think either my mum or my dad drove me to another room at Aston University in Birmingham. They took my shit with me. And then I lived there. And instead of my mum doing my laundry, I did it in a communal laundry. Instead of her cooking for me, I started cooking for myself. And that was it. And I'm making that point to just say, like, these are children. They're children. They've never made any money. Not real money. Like, I'd done odd jobs and bits and pieces, but I'd never made more than 200 quid a week. They've never run a business. They've never employed anybody. They don't have anything. Their resentment my resentment was towards the church, my private school, my parents. Why? Because I was a kid. Every kid resents the fucking institutions of authority and power. And we could have resented the universities, but the universities are full of young lecturers, 27 to 35, who are young enough to be hip, but old enough to be smart in terms of making money and spreading ideological infection. And I think they just went ham. They just went ham. They just said, fuck it. There's money to be made here. There's grift here. Teach these kids that we're the good guys, that their parents are pieces of shit, that capitalism is awful, that the church is awful, because it's not a hard pitch, is it? You know, you're young. I was listening to fucking Marilyn Manson, Pantera, Nine Inch Nails. It wasn't exactly like go to church and have a wife and have 2 kids music. It was a rebellious moment in my life, as it is for everybody that age. So we're all biologically left-wing revolutionaries under those circumstances. What do you want to tear down? Everything. Why? Well, I don't fucking have anything, so fuck them. I've got no stake in this game. Why do you want to burn that bank? Well, it doesn't have any of my money in it. Fuck the bank. You know, you might feel a bit differently if you'd spent 20 years working and your money was in there. So I think what you have is like if you look at the population and you say, like the article I read in 1996 was saying that between 1988, I don't know if this is true, something like this, people can correct me, something like between 86 and 95, the number of students had exploded by not twice, not 3 times, but I think by 10 times. And I don't know how much it is now. Look, bottom line, there's just not that many smart people around. There's tons of people who go to university who've no business being there. Tons. Like most of the people you and I, most, not all, but most of the people you and I know who have degrees wouldn't have got those degrees in 1980. They just weren't university material. They wouldn't have been asked. You don't have to be asked now. You just go and wave money and go, let me in, and somebody will let you in for something somewhere. So to make the point, the university population grew. It's a perfect breeding ground. You don't find conservatives on university campuses. We all know this. Like, they've been complaining about it for years. So it becomes a left-wing ideological breeding ground. Who's a conservative on a fucking university campus? I mean, they're called, like, for example, the joke we've had before on the podcast, they called Jordan Peterson a conservative. How skewed a worldview do you need to say a university professor who espouses liberal values and teaches psychology is a classic finger-wagging conservative? I mean, it's insane. So yeah, universities really, I can't help but echo his point. I really do think that's true.
Well, as you were talking, the kind of like this image of like a resentful nerd, you know, and this resentful nerd.
He said it. I didn't fucking say it.
This image of a resentful nerd is using the power of their own self-proclaimed into intellectualism.
Yeah.
To basically mount themselves above the rest of the class. Do you think there's any parallel with that type of psychological makeup or an archetype of sorts with the cultural wave that's happening now. Because just that last point here, it's not so much the bullying that you got from classic movies of like, I'm just tougher and this is why.
Yeah.
You suck just because. It's now rationalized. It's psychological terms. It's all with the disguise of a book.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think you're on something there, and it's not. It's a point that's been made before, and I think it's a perfectly valid point. Like archetypally, there is a takeover. There was even articles being written about 10, 12 years ago called The Takeover of the Nerds. And it wasn't just, that's a broader movement than just SJW style politics. It's also the technology as well. So there are areas where you can have power. You asked me before about the psychology thing and I didn't answer it. Psychology and universities and left-wing ideology go hand in hand. Because, as I explained in the video that we shot earlier, psychology and psychotherapy should be a safe space, and it should be politically correct, and it should also, to work, in order to do its job, it has a job to do, it should be hypersensitive to guarding people's triggers and all of these things that we see that bled out into the world where we demand, people with such and such a mental health issue, they deserve to be heard and they should be listened to. And it's like, ma'am, this is a fucking shoe factory. Like, what the fuck? We've expanded psychotherapy to the world. In a psychotherapeutic context, absolutely, you should be listened to. You should be heard. What else are you paying for? It should be a safe space. You shouldn't be judged. You should probably be encouraged in much the way a parent would encourage a child without breaking too many boundaries. But that's not an appropriate way of viewing the world. And that becomes... it's a weapon, but it's also a nice it's a nice environment to foster. And universities have been doing it deliberately. They were doing it when I was there. Not as badly as now, but they were starting to treat. There used to be a culture, I overuse that word, an atmosphere, a way of living that I remember in education, which was I was left the fuck alone, or I was occasionally lightly bullied by my teachers. And nowadays, people are like, oh my God, you were abused. No, these kids who are being interfered with all the time, they're abused. I was just told, Grannon, do your fucking work or shut the fuck up. If you're going to be an idiot, get the fuck out the classroom. And my answer was allowed to be either yes, sir, or no, sir. And if I said no, sir, they'd kick me out of school. The end. That was it. There was, when you might, like people listening to that might be like, it's too harsh. But all the choice these kids have now, they sit in a class and they go, I'm having a something moment. And the teacher has to be like, oh my God, everyone stop doing algebra because one child out of 30 is having a moment and the world has to stop. And people watching might be like, wow, that's really cruel. Okay, what about the other 29 fucking kids? If the individual has a problem, the individual should be dealing with it. But the schools are dealing with it. And parents encourage this because they're lazy. They don't want to do parenting. And the universities encourage it because there's money in it. And they don't want a bunch of highly individuated kids. The left-wing politics, the university culture, the radical leftist and psychology, they all go hand in hand. They have a history of this. Psychoanalysts and Marxism, there's tons of Marxists. I mean, my favorite philosopher, Slavoj Žižek, he's a Marxist, psychoanalyst, philosopher, because it goes hand in hand. The resentful nerd idea even started popping up around 2005, 2006 in martial arts. So you'd have guys in the martial arts world who were doing hardcore street self-defense from a nerd perspective. And I remember me and one of my mates were watching this and we're like, how is anyone even tolerating this nonsense? It was like the Emperor's New Clothes. We were all supposed to just sit there and let them promote themselves doing utter gibberish, totally nonsensical movements that were never going to work, to build these little microcosmic cultures where they had special names and they all wore special clothes. And there was even one where they'd issue rings. I'm not making this up. When you joined the Brotherhood, The issue, I was like, this is just fucking insane. And they become mini cults. So this spirit, culture, ideology, it fosters cult thinking because you can be whatever you want to be, and I can't condemn you and I can't judge you, and bullying is verboten. But how else would I stop you? By kind of bullying you. I mean, roasting, bullying, I'd be like, Pierre, for fuck's sake, what's with the rings, man? You know, you're showing people martial arts moves and telling them it's street self-defense. It's shit. But I'm not, and literally my tongue is like not allowed to say those fucking words. So how does anybody know anything? How does anybody know anything about anything? Everything is good. If you do it, it's good because you're not allowed to say it's shit. It drives me insane. Completely insane.
So all this has been more so the origin, when, and kind of like how this stuff has come to be. And I know the overall theme of what we're talking about is the potential collapse of civilization.
Yeah.
Now we can easily go into why racism is bad, why discrimination is bad.
I hope we don't have to. Murder also is bad.
Murder
Rape,
is bad.
Not ideal.
Racism and discrimination leading to rape and murder is also bad.
Also bad.
So let's try to ask a more niche question that still leads to the collapse of civilization, which goes into what you just said. So we're talking about these universities pushing out certain ideals, and that example that you just mentioned was, the math student is having a hyper-focused moment that's being interrupted and we can't applaud because it's over-sensory or something. How does a coddling, a stagnation that arises from situations like this and viewing the world through a more, I guess, an infantile approach to things and interacting psychologically convoluted, how does that lead to an eventual collapse?
I love this question. I love it. It's beautiful. Because those children grow up and become adults. They're time bombs. And civilization is made up of people. And if those people have no resilience, are hyper entitled, and unable to deal with stress, they can't hold anything in civilization. And there's too many of them. There's just too fucking, There's the other thing that drives me fucking mad is people say, this is not that big a deal. It's just happening on university campuses. No, it isn't. Corporations have to mirror this bullshit. They're forced. It's capitalism. That's the nature of capitalism today. They have to mirror this bullshit. They have to put out content that mirrors this bullshit. For the love of God, Pierre, I tried to watch Euphoria last night. For the love of all that is holy.
Did you finish it?
No, I watched 15 minutes and I was like, this is the most disgusting,
I told you, man,
decadent celebration of weakness I've ever seen in my life. I will watch the full episode because I promised to, but I was really upset. I was like, if this is what we are celebrating, we are fucked. The idea that this is, look, if you have mental health problems, I put out probably nearly thousands of hours of free content to help people with mental health problems. I don't lack compassion. I have mental health problems. But my God, I don't ask to be celebrated for it. I'm not asking to be celebrated because I don't function in certain key ways. We're so sick now. We're putting that on a pedestal. Isn't it cool? She's addicted to drugs and she's really smart and she has a raft of mental health problems. No, it's not cool. It's actually really, really sad. And spinning it into this this cool lopsided grin, it makes me important, it makes me special thing. I'm like, no, you've lost an ideal. Where is your idealism? You're not striving to be better. You're not, I'm sick. I know I'm sick. I've been sicker though, and I'm getting better. Why? Because I have an ideal. I'm moving towards something. I'm not languishing in my own shit. And just going, there's nothing I could possibly do. Snort less cocaine, maybe, to drink less alcohol, maybe these things, and, try to do better. Celebrating not trying, celebrating giving up, celebrating just tumbling back into the worst parts of who and what we are. Not that I'm not saying that it's bad that people are like that. It isn't. Some people can't help it. I'm not saying that some people shouldn't do it. Doesn't matter. But that's not niche. We're not talking about the punk movement in the 70s now. It's not niche. That's mainstream. And kids are looking at that aspirationally. Maybe I could grow up to be a fuck up too. Yeah, okay. And meanwhile, China rubs its hands. More, more. Because the soldiers of 20 years' time from now will be triggered by putting the armor on. They won't be able to wear a helmet because it affects their claustrophobia. When the big bang stick go bang, they get pee-pee. Not a shot will be fucking fired when the Chinese come. Not a shot will be fucking fired. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying this is cruel what we're doing to these children. And it's not hard to make people tougher. It's not hard. I mean, like we were boxing yesterday, we were doing the training yesterday. And I'm saying to you, like, I'm going to hit you in the face. And you go, oh. And then I go like that. And you go, oh, I didn't die. Well, now I'm going to do it faster. And then I do it full speed. And I clout you in the chin and you roll with it. And you're like, oh, shit, I can get punched in the face. You walk out the gym like, I got punched in the face and I didn't die. And I hit back. Hallelujah. It's good for you. It's good for people to take knocks. It's good for people to, this is all part of growing up and expanding. This psychologized culture, hyper-psychologized culture is great for drug companies. It's great for counselors. It's great for politicians who want to, coerce people's votes and don't want people to rebel and rise up. It's great for corporations who have shit to sell because we know anxious and depressed people who are agitated and angry buy more stuff, trying to change their states. But it's not good for humanity. It's not good for civilization. Not at all.
I actually felt sick after Euphoria.
Did you?
I was actually nauseous and I didn't know what it was, but I think you actually nailed it right on the head. It was something very anti-human progress, anti-human resilience.
Yeah.
And I felt really nauseous after that.
Yeah.
Maybe this can actually lead to you expanding upon what slave morality is and how elements of the show deal with that, but more importantly, the culture at large and how that ties into what slave morality is.
Damn, son. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a big question. And it's so important to the times we're living through now. So briefly, slave morality is Nietzsche's concept, and fundamentally, it's a criticism of Christianity and its roots. Slave morality exists in opposition to master morality. And if I cut to the chase, if we imagine early Jewish Christians who would still consider themselves Jewish but followers of Christ, and the Romans. So the Romans had all the power in that time and in that place, and they had all the wealth. They could afford to be promiscuous. They could afford to feast. They could kill people. They could torture people to death for their amusement. And if you were a Jew who followed Christ, you were rejected by Jews. So you couldn't turn to the Pharisees, who did have some political power in that time. And you couldn't turn to your fellow Jews because they were like, well, you're an infidel or you're an idiot because you're following somebody who we believe is an imposter. That's mainstream Judaism. Might not be today, but at the time, make no mistake, the Jews thought Jesus was a fraud. Like it is written. So they were like, you're following an idiot. No, fuck you. We're not going to help you. So they became, I guess the only equivalent we would have today, like in Central Europe, where we're shooting this now in Prague, would be gypsies, the way we view gypsies. They're sort of like, they're homeless, they're transient, they're moving, and they're cult followers. They're brainwashed cult followers. A joke, basically. A joke. The lowest rung of society. So what was master morality? Morality here is more like, it's an old-fashioned word. Nietzsche's right in the 1880s. It's like code of conduct. It's a worldview. So the master worldview, the individual should be strong. The individual can take power. We should compete. We should fight for what we want. We should enjoy earthly pleasures, the pleasures of the flesh. When you die, you're dead and it's gone. Live for today. What did Maximus say in Gladiator? What you do today echoes in eternity. That's master morality, the master mindset. Master, not in the sense, Nietzsche wasn't saying we should aspire to that. He wasn't saying that's good and slave morality is bad. I think the implication is they're both bad in a way, but his real criticism was for slave morality. That's the Romans. That's the master morality. Individual, pleasure the flesh, eat, drink, fuck, be merry, because when you're dead, you're gone and it's over. Okay. Dominate the material world. Have power. Power is good. Slave morality. I'm weak. Nobody loves me. I'm the lowest rung of society. I'm poor. I don't have the ability to rise up and kill people. I don't have the ability to invade foreign lands and steal their resources. I can't be promiscuous because nobody wants me. What do I do? What do I do? I do like a mental piece of acrobatics to change my position from weak to strong. The slave morality, the slave mindset. What do? I develop resentment for the masters. And this is according to Nietzsche. He used a French word, ressentiment, where the resentment is so strong, so pervasive, and goes on for so long, and it has to have an identified target. The identified target is the people in power. I'm weak, you're strong. How do I make myself strong behind your back in a way where you don't crucify me or flay me alive or feed me to the fucking lions? I say, yes, sir, no, sir. But in my head, I think, you're gonna be tortured in hell. When you die, you know where you're going, mate? You're going to have your eyes pulled out. You're going to be fucked up the ass with a pitchfork, blah, 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 blah. You know where I'm going? The best place, like 6-star hotel up in heaven for me, my family, and I'll be rewarded when we die. There's an afterlife. In this world, I'm nothing, but the lower I get, you know what don't say this to him, I just think it because I'm a coward. The lower I go, the higher I'll rise. The more submissive, sheep-like, and subservient I am, and my God, not your stinky, stupid gods, blah, blah. My God loves me more, and Daddy will reward me later. And Nietzsche saw that as the most broad-scale, disgraceful act of cowardice, and I 1,000% agree with him. And it sank into our culture. We live in a Christian culture. I'm not railing against Christian culture like Nietzsche did, but I would rail against slave morality. What you should do in those circumstances. So if you're in a weak circumstance and you have master morality, my God, I talked about this before and I talked about it here. I'm having a flashback. That'd probably take too long to describe. Okay, basically, master morality if you're enslaved. Julius Caesar, what did he do when he was enslaved? The pirates took him and he bullied the pirates who imprisoned him. He made them listen to his poetry. He wrote obnoxious poetry and then he practiced orating to the pirates. He'd be like, I have a speech, you bitches are going to listen to this now. They asked for a ransom and he said, that ransom is a fucking disgrace. You double that fucking ransom or, I'll kill myself. And you won't be like, he was a beast. He was enslaved, but he was in master morality. When they eventually paid the ransom, he went back to his people. They said, thank you very much for this big chest of gold. It's twice as much as we thought we were going to get. See you, Julius. Julius was like, see you later, lads. Gets back on his ship, reinvades the pirates, crucifies them all, and takes the money for himself. That's master morality when enslaved. If you're enslaved by the Romans, you should rise up and kill them. That's master morality. Many Jews did. Let's keep the history right. That's what a zealot is. And that's what a sicario is. These are the Jewish assassins, the terrorists, dissidents, if you like, that rose up and killed the Romans, as they should have done. Our culture today worships slavery. Our cultural today worships submissiveness and victimhood, and that is the essence of slave morality. So now, how do you win? Be the most oppressed. The Oppression Olympics is a term that I heard first used by, what's her name? The politician that we both follow on Instagram, the black girl, Candace Owens. She talks about, she's great. She's fucking great. But she rails against the woke for this Oppression Olympics nonsense. Look, people are oppressed. They are enslaved. They are exploited. They are abused. But we shouldn't compete to have our place on the lowest rung of the ladder. If we're going to compete, we should be trying to go up, not down. So slave morality has gotten into our culture and it seeped into everything because it's a way of winning the game without trying. Yeah. So as you're winning the game without trying, why would you want to do that? It's cowardice. It's pure cowardice. You don't have to try. So then we both watch a show like Euphoria and you see it's riddled with woke slave morality. This is how you win. Be the biggest, most useless, depraved, decrepit, morally degenerate bomb you can possibly be. That's the message we're giving to these kids. Be the biggest slave you can be, in the Nietzschean sense. Be the biggest coward you can be. Check out, drop out, do nothing, don't try, take drugs. It's all screwed anyway. And I just think, Well, who's going to benefit? The masters will benefit. To go into conspiracy theory, but there are people who run this world and they have an agenda that affects masses of people. They have things to sell you. They have a way they want you to vote. They have wars they want you to fight in. And they don't want you to have a master morality, a master mindset. They want you to have a slave mindset. Slave mindset, resentful, cowardly, pities itself, strives to compete to be the biggest fucking victim in the room. That's the essence of slave morality. And we see it writ large. And Euphoria, well, at least I haven't watched it, but the first 20 minutes of the first episode of the first season of Euphoria was the worst, most disgusting, disgraceful epitome of glorifying slave morality I have ever seen in my fucking life. It should, like, you shouldn't be feeding kids stuff like that because it's an over 18, of course it is, but kids will get access to it. We know they do. Now that's what they aspire to. Great. Well done, everyone. That's how you ruin a generation and destroy a civilization from the inside out.
What, at two levels, conscious and unconscious,
Yeah.
do you think the desires of the current youth and younger are really looking to try to attain what maybe they actually need and how they feel about their own position? You being older and on the outside.
How do I think this affects what they want, you mean?
Well, at two levels, what do you think their desires really are? And what could actually be used for them in possibly improving, or if there is anything at all?
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good question. Because I think your moral outrage, my moral outrage with this kind of thing really, really speaks to that. Just before I go into that, just to say, like, we're both very socially liberal people. We're having this conversation like a pair of social conservatives, but we ain't lived that life. So if you want to drink, drink. If you want to take drugs, take drugs. If you want to be promiscuous, it's your body. As long as you clean up after yourself and you don't whinge, I say do whatever you want. It's not about, so I don't want this to get derailed into being like people attacking us for that. Like we're saying, don't do that when we've done it. It's don't glorify this in a way it doesn't deserve. And I would never glorify that life. And don't glorify it to children. Adolescents are still children. I mean, Christ almighty. People don't grow up now until the age of 24, 25 anyway. What do young people desire, you said? And this is really key, and it feeds the moral outrage. What they desire is to be accepted. What they desire is to be seen in their social group and to have this this social currency of coolness. They want to be cool. So if you say to them, the only way you're going to be accepted in your social group is this fringe activity or this depraved activity or this frankly fringe identity. I'm not speaking out against anybody. Be who you are. If you feel you need to dress this way, talk this way, do that. Do you. That's fine. But stop pretending that this is mainstream and stop telling children that it's mainstream and stop implying to young people that if they're not on the fringe, they don't exist. If they're not on the fringe or they're not broken or they don't have a laundry list of mental health issues and they're not on prescription drugs and they're not taking drugs and they're not promiscuous and they're not ruining their lives, that they don't exist and they're not part of the group and that they can't be seen. Coolness is being seen and it's also having a say. You get to kind of shape the culture that you're in if you're cool, but you're seen. You're there in the dominance hierarchy if you like that model. And what they're doing is subversive. They're subverting young people's minds to think that that's the way. That's what cool is now. That's the way to get accepted. That's the way to be seen. And I think as you're not that much older than this generation, but so much has happened in such a short period of time. You feel that moral outrage because even if you can't always fully verbalize it, you feel it in your gut. You're like, this is disgusting. Well, what's disgusting? Is it the act itself? Is it the middle-aged man with the trans girl? Well, yeah, but not. It's the context. You're putting this up there and saying, this is good. This is cool. This is how young people act. Why? Why? Like, what? It's really, the elephant in the room here, I think, is it's really hard not to feel like this is deliberate. It's really, really tough now to not sort of be saying like, it feels like this is a deliberate effort to demoralize a culture and to demoralize a generation and to push them into degeneracy. Again, it's not hard. Turning kids into left-wing revolutionaries is not a big, brave, clever thing to do. It's a piece of piss. Getting kids to sink into their own shit and their own shadow and get them involved in promiscuity, drugs, and everything else, it's not hard. You know, you're just feeding back into them what they already want because they're children. They're young adults, let's say. So the hormones are raging. This is what they're obsessed with. They're obsessed with new experiences, coolness, trying new things. And it's all about breaking barriers. You want to lose your virginity. You want to get drunk for the first time. You want to take ease for the first time. You want to go to your first festival. You want to do... It's all about breaking barriers, which is good. So they've actually hijacked a completely legitimate, libidinal, life-driving, lustful force towards life and then turned it back into something thanatic and deathly. Because that is deathly. There's no life at the end of that. If you're shoving powder up your nose, popping prescription pills, and, you know, not to want to sound too moralistic, but like this kind of sexual behavior, if it's repeated over and over and over again and it's normalized across a large enough population, you can't say that's not going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. That's not a moral judgment. That's statistics. Like, it has to be a problem eventually for multiple reasons and in multiple ways. So I think the moral outrage is, if you look in a nuanced way at why you're feeling the way you're feeling and what the implications are, it's completely justified. Completely justified.
Maybe to briefly add on to this that you just said, maybe we can expand on perhaps how is there this dichotomy of complete degeneracy that you see on Euphoria, but at the same time, the saintlyhood of being a moral social justice Jesus. How do these two relate to each other? How do they coincide? And what is that the result of?
How do they coincide and what is that the result of? So you're saintly, but you engage in moral depravity. So this is not me saying it. This is according to this ideology. According to this ideological infection, your pain, your scars, your mental health issues, the pills you pop and the sex you have are a result of your oppression. You're oppressed. Bearing in mind, we're talking about the children of the richest nation on earth. The most privileged people on earth are being told that they are the most oppressed. It's an insane amount of gaslighting. So the ideology says, none of that is your fault. All of that is as a result of your victimhood and or it's your liberty to express yourself in whatever way you want to, however coercively, and we've both joked about this, as long as it's not normal heterosexual activity. You can express yourself however you want, just don't be straight. Do whatever you want to do, kids, but not a boy and a girl. There has to be some variation of that. That's wrong. I mean, that is just completely insane. And at the same time, whilst engaging in all this moral degeneracy, which isn't their fault because they're the victims, and they're the victims of some grand conspiracy and some global level of oppression somehow, they are the most saintly people on earth because they identify with the victimhood of others. And you've said this before, and I know that it's something that Douglas Murray has said. There's something deeply religious about, not spiritual, religious. It's like a Catholic who goes and sleeps with 5 prostitutes, goes home, gives his wife syphilis, and then goes and pays the priest, or goes and pays for a favor, or goes and does confession, and then he's okay. And then every sin is wiped clean. And the one starts to feed the other. And the weird thing, the sick thing about this is, the reason why it's working is because it's functional. Within its own sick paradigms, it works. So people who are highly emotionally dysregulated, which all adolescents are gathering a kind of level of emotional regulation through the discipline and the structure of drug addiction and promiscuity. That's their ideology. That's their religion. That's their life. Recently, I saw an interview, I think it was on trigonometry, in fact it was, where they asked, what is ideology? And they all agreed it was quite difficult to define. Sam Vaknin has defined ideology as the poor man's philosophy. I was having a bit of a think to myself today. Ideology is a poor man's philosophy. It is hard to define. It's also it's a parasitic mind virus that gives you certain coordinates through which to sort through reality. It's artificial intelligence in a certain sense. It hacks into your brain and thinks for you whilst fooling you, you're thinking for yourself. But here's a key. I thought of this today. It has something to sell. It's not philosophy because it has something to sell, but it never tells you what it is selling. It just has an agenda. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted you to continue, maybe hammer that a little more.
Mm-hmm.
There's always an end result, a predetermined end result of the thought process. Maybe clarify that just a tiny bit.
So with ideology, we're not just being, what I mean by this, with ideology, we're not just being permitted to think within a certain paradigm. We're not just going, oh, here's the Zen tradition, here's the Gnostic tradition, here's Nietzschean thought, Kierkegaardian thought. No. Our consciousness is being corralled like a pig down a slippery chute towards slaughter. There's an end point. That's ideology. Ideology has an end point, and it goes, hey, here's the sandbox of thinking. It's always a sandbox. You can think whatever you want inside these four walls, only within these four walls, and the walls get tighter and tighter every day. And at one side of the sandbox where you're eventually going to end up, you make a certain decision and you move in a certain direction that I'm moving you in. If you're not going there fast enough, I just shift the sandbox and just tilt it a little bit and shunk you along to that side until you eventually go down the chute. That's ideology. It's not ideology if it tells you what the point is. That's just cult brainwashing. Ideology is slightly smarter than cult brainwashing. It never actually tells you what the point is. It lets you come to the conclusion yourself so that you think it's your choice. You think you're the one choosing that conclusion. But no, ideology is pushing you towards that conclusion, absolutely.
And I think to wrap it up on a positive note, perhaps we can elaborate what the antidote to that is.
The antidote to all of this, I think is fairly straightforward. Like, number one, don't feed young people crazy bullshit ideas that hurt them. I mean, these are clearly poisonous ideas. I don't know how parents and teachers are letting this slip past them. Where are the adults? Why is nobody taking responsibility? You know, one of the problems we have as a culture is we've decided you can't make moral judgments, you can't make moral condemnations, and you're not allowed to say no. Who benefits from you not being able to say no? Abusers. People who want to abuse you. Say no. Just be like, look at that. That's disgusting. No. Just straightforward. Like, no, we're not doing that. That's fucked up. And I think with kids, they need role models, and you just show them a better way. Like, what do you want? Do you want your life to suck? Do you want to be depressed? Show them a better way. Look, if you do it like this, there's the end result. What do you want? You want to be loved? You want to be free? You want to make money? You want to be healthy? What do you want? Focus on what you do want, not on all this depraved nonsense. And there are cultural engineers. There are people who sort of mold consent and mold people's minds. You just make healthier stuff cool again. Like nicer, healthier, brighter, lighter things cool again without excluding anybody, because it was the exclusion before that's led to what we're dealing with now. Just don't exclude anybody. Just don't ever say or imply that group sucks, ignore them. Not even that group sucks, beat them up. Don't ignore people. Don't be like that group doesn't exist. I'm still on the left. I'm for inclusivity. I'm not for excluding people, but we need to move towards the light, man. I mean, this is just ridiculously dark at this point. And it's, as I said earlier, it's very, very hard for me to not think that this is a deliberate ideological subversion. So the antidote to this would be to say, what, this ideology is spinning you this way. What are we going to do? Do we create an ideology that spins the other way? Yes, we could do, but that's a weak response. I would prefer an anti-ideology. Not the Zizek says, I want a third pill, not the blue pill, not the red pill. I want a third pill. I want the anti-ideological pill that just awakens people, that just awakens their consciousness. This is your consciousness. These are your emotions. These are your physiological drives. Don't get manipulated, kids. Open them up. And then if you do that, and they still choose to live whatever life they want, go with God. Great. But you have a choice now. This is not a choice. This is coercion.